Poor girl marries millionaire for sick brother. Millionaire's cold heart breaks when he sees her fighting alone. The charity gala's crystal chandeliers mocked Lauren Mitchell Carter with their brilliance as she intercepted another text from her father. Michael's condition is worsening. We need the money tonight. Her fingers tightened around her phone, knuckles white against her black evening gown. Across the Carter family's ballroom, her husband Ethan continued entertaining investors, his polished smile never wavering. He looked every inch the business heir he was, devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, but as distant as the stars outside. "Quite the power couple you two make," Jessica's voice dripped with honey-coated venom as Lauren's sister sidled up beside her. "Though, I noticed you haven't spent 5 minutes together all evening." Lauren maintained her composure, years of practice keeping her expression neutral. "Not now, Jess." "Oh, but it's the perfect time." Jessica sipped her champagne, green eyes glinting. "Dad's getting impatient. Have you convinced your wealthy husband to invest in our family business yet?" The mention of their father sent ice through Lauren's veins. James Mitchell had orchestrated this marriage with the same calculating precision he applied to all his schemes, using Michael's heart condition as the perfect leverage. Her sweet teenage brother lying in a hospital bed while their father played puppet master with his survival. "Mrs. Carter." Ryan's voice cut through her thoughts. Her husband's half-brother appeared at Jessica's elbow, his smile sharp as a blade. "Your father-in-law is asking for you. Something about the new children's hospital wing donation?" Lauren's pulse quickened. Henry Carter had fought against this marriage from the start, convinced she was another gold digger like Ryan's mother. Now he scrutinized her every move, waiting for proof of his suspicions. She glimpsed Ethan watching her from across the room. For a moment, something flickered in his dark eyes. Concern? But he turned away, leaving her to face his family alone. Their marriage of convenience had strict boundaries after all. "Don't keep them waiting, sis." Jessica's whisper followed her. "Wouldn't want to disappoint another family, would you?" Lauren straightened her spine, weighing the impossible choices before her. Her father's deadline threatened Michael's next surgery. Henry Carter's suspicion endangered her position in the family, and somewhere in this glittering crowd, she knew Ryan and Jessica were weaving their own schemes, united by shared resentment. Her phone buzzed again. "Time's running out, Lauren. Don't fail your brother." She deleted the message, plastered on her most gracious smile, and moved toward her fate. She had survived 2 years in this gilded cage, dancing to everyone else's tunes. But tonight, something had to break. She just prayed it wouldn't be her. 2 years ago, Lauren would have laughed at the idea of marriage to Ethan Carter. Back then, she'd been focused on building her own consulting firm, determined to help her family through legitimate means. But Michael's first heart attack at 16 had changed everything. She could still hear the doctors' voices. Experimental treatment, significant costs, time-sensitive situation. And then her father's solution. The Carters needed a suitable marriage for their heir, and James Mitchell needed money for his son's treatment. She never expected Ethan to agree. The notorious workaholic who ran the Carter Group's international division had women throwing themselves at him daily. Yet he'd assessed their arranged marriage like any other business transaction: efficient, logical, and emotionally detached. "We both get what we need," he'd said during their single pre-wedding meeting. "I fulfill my grandfather's requirements for succession, and your brother gets his treatment." What Ethan hadn't mentioned was his half-brother Ryan's fury at being passed over, or how Jessica would use Lauren's new position to advance her own agenda within both families. The betrayal from her sister cut deeper than the whispers of gold digger that followed Lauren through Carter Manor's halls. "You always were Daddy's perfect puppet," Jessica had spat after one particularly vicious argument. "First supporting Michael while I was ignored, now selling yourself to the Carters. At least I'm honest about wanting more than our father's scraps." But Jessica didn't know about the nights Lauren spent poring over medical research, searching for alternative treatments for Michael. Or the careful documentation she'd begun keeping of their father's increasingly suspicious business dealings. James Mitchell's demands for Carter family investments had grown more frequent, even as Michael's designated treatment fund seemed to shrink. The only unpredictable element in Lauren's careful balancing act was Ethan himself. They maintained separate wings of the manor, their interactions limited to public appearances and family functions. Yet sometimes she caught him watching her with an intensity that made her wonder what he was really thinking. Like last month when he'd silently handed her a file containing specialized cardiac research, or last week when he'd stepped between her and Ryan during a heated boardroom confrontation. "My brother's playing his own game," Ethan had warned her afterward, his usual coldness tinged with something else. "Be careful." Lauren hadn't told him about finding Ryan and Jessica huddled together in her father's study, or the fragments of conversation she'd overheard about leverage and company vulnerabilities. She'd learned to keep her own counsel, especially after discovering that Henry Carter had hired private investigators to monitor her activities. The elderly patriarch made no secret of his disdain. "The Mitchell family's reputation speaks for itself," he'd announced at yesterday's board meeting. "Before we consider any additional investments, I want a full audit." It was a direct threat. An audit would expose her father's misappropriation of funds, including the money meant for Michael's care. Lauren had spent the night searching for alternatives, any way to protect her brother without compromising herself further. But dawn had brought only her father's increasingly desperate messages and the weight of choices she couldn't outrun. Now, standing in her private office at Carter Manor, Lauren studied the latest medical reports from Michael's doctors. His condition was deteriorating faster than expected. The experimental treatment was working, but he needed the next phase soon. Her father's text messages had become hourly reminders of what was at stake. A knock at her door made her quickly hide the reports. Ethan entered without waiting for a response, his expression unreadable as always, but there was tension in his shoulders she'd learned to recognize. "Your sister's been appointed to the board of Mitchell Industries," he said without preamble. "Ryan sponsored her nomination." Lauren felt the net tightening. Jessica had always wanted more power in the family company, and Ryan's support meant they were accelerating whatever plans they'd made. "There's something else." Ethan hesitated, an unusual break in his composure. "Henry's investigators delivered their preliminary report this morning. He's calling an emergency board meeting." Their eyes met, and for the first time, Lauren saw genuine concern in her husband's gaze. She had until the meeting to make a decision: protect her brother or expose her father's crimes, save Michael or save herself. The choice had been inevitable from the start. I'll continue with the 1,500-word first act development section, escalating the conflicts and showing Lauren taking initial action. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m., giving Lauren exactly 6 hours to act. She slipped Michael's medical files into her briefcase, along with the documentation she'd gathered on her father's financial maneuvers. The weight of the papers felt like lead, each page representing another crack in the foundation of her careful plans. Her office phone lit up with Jessica's number for the third time. Lauren ignored it, focusing instead on the encrypted email she'd just received from her contact at the hospital's research department. The latest trial results from Michael's treatment program showed promise, but also complications. They needed to adjust his protocol immediately, which meant more funds, more quickly than she'd anticipated. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting another message delivery from the board. Instead, Ethan stepped inside, closing the door carefully behind him. "We need to talk." His voice was low, controlled as always, but she caught an undercurrent of urgency that made her pulse quicken. He crossed to her desk and placed a thick folder in front of her. "Before Henry presents this at the meeting." Lauren opened the folder and felt her breath catch. Bank statements, transfer records, surveillance photos. A complete investigation into the Mitchell family's finances going back 5 years. Her father's misappropriations were highlighted in damning red ink, including, "The treatment fund," she whispered. "Only 30% of the money has actually gone to Michael's care." Ethan's words were carefully neutral. The rest has been diverted through a series of shell companies, most recently to accounts controlled by Ryan and Jessica. The betrayal hit Lauren like a physical blow. She'd known her father was desperate, suspected he was cutting corners, but this… they're working together. All of them. Yes. Ethan leaned against her desk, closer than he usually allowed himself. Ryan's been feeding information to your father for months, helping him hide the transactions. In exchange, James has been helping Ryan build a case against my leadership of the company. Lauren's mind raced through implications. And Jessica, gathering evidence against you. Apparently, she's convinced Henry that you've been the one embezzling funds. His jaw tightened. They're planning to use today's meeting to demand your removal from the family and the company. If you are enjoying the story till now, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It costs you nothing, but for us, especially in these early days, it means the world. Let's continue. Which would invalidate our marriage agreement, Lauren concluded, and the company's obligation to fund Michael's treatment. She looked up at Ethan, really looked at him. Why are you showing me this? Something flickered in his dark eyes. Because in 2 years, you've never once asked me for money for yourself. Because I've watched you spend every free moment researching treatments and charities. Because… he straightened, as if catching himself showing too much. Because this isn't just about our families anymore. Before Lauren could process that, her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Dad's here at the hospital. He's talking about moving me to a different facility. Cold fear gripped her heart. James Mitchell was making his move, ensuring his leverage remained intact. She stood abruptly. I have to go. Lauren! Ethan's hand caught her arm, the first time he'd touched her in months. Whatever you're planning, be careful. Ryan's had people watching you. She met his gaze steadily. Why do you care? Because I'm tired of watching you carry this alone. The simple honesty in his voice shook her more than any elaborate declaration could have. Lauren allowed herself one moment to absorb it, then gently pulled away. I need you to do something for me. Name it. Keep Henry at the office. Delay the meeting as long as you can. She gathered her files quickly. And if anyone asks, you haven't seen me today. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're going to move him first. Michael's legal guardian is still our mother, who's been conveniently traveling abroad, but I have medical power of attorney. Lauren squared her shoulders. I'm done letting them use him as a pawn. You'll need resources, protection. Ethan moved to his laptop, fingers flying over the keys. I'm transferring emergency funds to your private account. And Lauren? He looked up, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. Whatever you decide to do next, you're not alone anymore. The words hung between them, shifting something fundamental in their carefully constructed arrangement. Lauren allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Thank you. She was halfway to the door when Ethan spoke again. They'll try to paint this as proof of their accusations. Running away with company money. I know, Lauren's hand tightened on her briefcase. But sometimes you have to break the rules to do what's right. She closed the door behind her, mind already racing through logistics. The private medical facility in Switzerland had been her backup plan for months. All the arrangements were in place, waiting only for the right moment. Now, she just had to reach Michael before their father's manipulations went too far. Her phone buzzed again as she reached her car. A message from Jessica. Running away, sis? You always were a coward. Lauren deleted it without responding. Let them think she was running. By the time they realized what she was really doing, it would be too late to stop her. I'll proceed with the 2,000-word middle conflict section, escalating the tension and complications. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before Lauren as she hurried toward Michael's room. Every step echoed with urgency, her heels clicking against sterile tiles. She rounded the corner and stopped dead. Ryan Carter stood outside Michael's door, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with her father. Lauren ducked back, heart pounding. She pulled out her phone, texting Ethan. Ryan's here. How? The response came instantly. He left the office an hour ago, said he was meeting investors. Lauren peered around the corner again. James Mitchell was gesturing emphatically, his usual polish cracking under strain. Ryan's posture radiated calculated calm, the same stance he took during hostile takeovers. This wasn't a coincidence. They were executing their plan early. Her phone buzzed again. Jessica, did you really think we wouldn't be ready for you? A nurse emerged from Michael's room, and Lauren seized her chance, approaching from the opposite direction. She caught fragments of conversation as she drew closer. Transfer papers are ready, Ryan was saying. The facility in Arizona… Lauren! Michael's voice rang out from the doorway. Her brother sat in a wheelchair looking painfully young in his hospital gown. His face lit up at sight of her, then fell as he registered the tension in the air. James Mitchell spun around, his mask of fatherly concern slipping for just a moment. Sweetheart, what a surprise. We were just discussing Michael's care options. Were you? Lauren kept her voice steady, professional. That's interesting considering I have his medical power of attorney. Ryan's smile didn't waver. James was just explaining the financial situation. Unfortunately, there seemed to be some irregularities with the treatment fund. The board is very concerned. I'm sure they are. Lauren moved to Michael's side, resting a hand on his shoulder. She felt him trembling slightly. But any decisions about Michael's care go through me, and he's not going anywhere. Be reasonable, Lauren. Her father stepped closer, lowering his voice. You know what's at stake here. The board meeting is exactly why you're trying to move him now. Lauren met his gaze coldly. Using your own son as leverage. Again. Michael's head snapped up. What's she talking about, Dad? Nothing you need to worry about, James said smoothly. Your sister's just upset. I'm talking about how only 30% of your treatment fund has actually gone to your treatment, Lauren said, keeping her eyes on her father. Would you like to explain where the rest went, Dad? Or should I ask Ryan? Ryan's composed facade cracked slightly. James Mitchell's face flushed dark red. You're making dangerous accusations, Ryan warned. No, I'm stating facts. Facts that Henry Carter will have in his hands within the hour. Lauren squeezed Michael's shoulder gently. Along with proof of who's really been embezzling from the company. Her father stepped forward menacingly. You wouldn't dare. Step back, James. Ethan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Lauren hadn't heard him approach, but there he stood in the doorway, radiating quiet authority. The hospital security team flanked him, along with a woman Lauren recognized as the head of the hospital's legal department. Mr. Mitchell, the lawyer said crisply, I have some concerns about these transfer documents you submitted. They appear to be falsified. James Mitchell's face went from red to white. Ryan's hand twitched toward his phone, but Ethan's next words froze him. I wouldn't, her husband said softly. The board's already in session. Special emergency meeting. Henry's quite interested in the evidence Lauren gathered. Evidence? Michael's voice shook. Lauren, what's going on? Lauren knelt beside her brother's wheelchair. I'm so sorry, Michael. I wanted to protect you from all this. But Dad's been using your condition to manipulate everyone. The money that was supposed to be for your treatment? He's been stealing it, working with Ryan and Jessica to hide the transfers. That's a lie, James burst out. Everything I did was for this family. No, Lauren stood, steel in her spine. Everything you did was for yourself. But it's over now. Security will escort you out, Ethan said to Ryan and James. I suggest you go quietly. Henry's lawyers are already preparing statements. Ryan's mask finally cracked completely. You sanctimonious bastard. You think you've won? Jessica's already being interviewed by the SEC, Ethan cut in. Apparently, someone anonymously reported some very interesting trades she made with insider information. Strange timing. Lauren glanced at her husband sharply. He met her gaze with the smallest hint of a smile. As security led Ryan and James away, Michael grabbed Lauren's hand. I don't understand. All this time. "I'll explain everything," she promised. "But first, we need to get you moved." Moved? Fear flickered in his eyes. Where? To a private facility in Switzerland. Ethan stepped forward. "They're expecting you. Their success rate with your specific condition is exceptional." Michael looked between them, confusion evident. "You're working together. I thought," Jessica said. "Jessica said a lot of things," Lauren sighed. "Most of them weren't true." "The air ambulance is ready whenever you are," Ethan said quietly. "The medical team's been briefed." Lauren blinked at him. "You arranged it already?" "I told you weren't alone anymore." His hand brushed hers briefly. "I meant it." The moment was broken by Lauren's phone buzzing again. A message from Jessica. "Congratulations, you've ruined everything. Hope you're happy playing the hero, but did you really think this was our only plan?" Before Lauren could process the warning, alarms began blaring throughout the hospital. "Code Silver," a calm voice announced over the speakers. "Armed suspect in the building. All patients shelter in place." Ethan's phone rang. His face hardened as he listened. "Henry's been shot at the office. He's alive, but—" Lauren felt ice in her veins. "Jessica?" "Gone, along with the evidence files." Ethan's eyes met hers. This was never just about Michael or the company, was it? No, Lauren realized. This was about destroying both our families completely. The next 12 hours unfolded in a blur of calculated chaos. Lauren sat beside Michael's bed in the secure wing of the hospital, watching dawn break over the city while security teams swept every floor. Her phone displayed a constant stream of updates. Henry Carter was in stable condition after surgery. The police had found Jessica's abandoned car at the airport. Ryan had been detained trying to access offshore accounts. "You should sleep," Ethan said softly, entering with 2 cups of coffee. He'd shed his suit jacket hours ago, sleeves rolled up, showing a rare glimpse of the man beneath the polished exterior. "Not yet." Lauren accepted the coffee gratefully. "The transfer team arrives in an hour. I want to be alert." Ethan settled into the chair beside her, closer than he'd ever voluntarily sat before. The police found something in Jessica's car, files dating back years, documentation of every scheme our families have been involved in. She was building a failsafe, Lauren realized. Insurance in case everything went wrong. Or ammunition to destroy everyone if she couldn't win. Ethan's voice held a note of respect. "Your sister's more dangerous than Ryan ever was. She played all of us." Lauren looked at Michael's sleeping form, peaceful despite the increased security outside his door. She knew exactly what buttons to push. My guilt over Michael, Dad's greed, Ryan's resentment of you, Henry's suspicion of me. And my inability to trust. Ethan's admission hung in the air between them. "I should have seen what was happening sooner. Should have trusted what I observed about you instead of maintaining distance." "We both built walls," Lauren acknowledged. "It was safer that way." Was it? His hand found hers in the dim light. Or did we just make ourselves easier targets by staying isolated? Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Her breath caught as she read it. "Remember when we were kids, Lauren? How you always had to save everyone? Some things never change, but can you save them all at once?" Attached were 3 photos. Their father being led into a police car, Henry Carter in his hospital bed, and a final image that made her blood run cold, her mother at some tropical resort, a figure lurking in the background. "Jessica's with our mother," Lauren whispered. "She's going to use her to negotiate." Ethan studied the photos intently. "The resort logo. I know this place. It's one of our properties in Thailand." "Of course it is." Lauren stood, adrenaline pushing away exhaustion. "She wants us to come, wants to force a confrontation on her terms." "While we're vulnerable," Ethan agreed. "Michael's transfer, Henry's recovery, the company in chaos. She's timing this perfectly." Lauren's mind raced through scenarios. The transfer team can protect Michael. The hospital's secure, and Jessica won't risk hurting him anyway. She needs him alive as leverage. But my mother... "I'm coming with you," Ethan said firmly. "You can't. Henry needs the company stable, which means we present a united front." He stood, still holding her hand. "Besides, I'm done letting you face these battles alone." The simple declaration wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket. Lauren found herself swaying slightly, exhaustion and emotion finally catching up. Ethan steadied her, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. "When this is over," he said quietly, "we should discuss renegotiating the terms of our marriage." Lauren felt warmth bloom in her chest despite the crisis. Toward what end? Something real. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "If you're willing." The moment was interrupted by another message. "Tick-tock, sis. Mom's asking questions about Michael's missing treatment money. Imagine her disappointment when she learns how her perfect daughter failed to protect him." Lauren straightened, drawing strength from Ethan's steady presence. "She's trying to make me reactive, emotional. Then we do the opposite." Ethan's tactical mind engaged. "We plan, we prepare, and we show her what happens when she underestimates us both." Lauren looked at Michael once more, then at the photos on her phone. "Jessica wants a showdown? Fine. But this time, we play by my rules." She felt Ethan's quiet approval as she began outlining their counterattack. For the first time since this all began, they weren't just allies of convenience. They were partners, and Jessica was about to learn exactly how dangerous that combination could be. I'll proceed with the 1,000-word climax build-up section, setting up the final confrontation with Jessica. The Carter family's resort in Thailand rose like a pearl against the turquoise sea. Lauren and Ethan arrived as sunset painted the sky in shades of amber, their private security team dispersing discreetly among the guests. After 18 hours of travel, every nerve in Lauren's body hummed with tension. "She's watching," Ethan murmured, his hand resting protectively at the small of her back. The gesture felt natural now, as if the walls between them had never existed. Lauren scanned the open-air lobby, taking in every detail. "Third-floor balcony. She wants us to see her." Jessica stood above them, elegant in white, their mother, Catherine Mitchell, beside her. Even from this distance, Lauren could read the distress in her mother's posture. Her phone buzzed. "Family reunion time. Come alone, or Mom learns exactly how much money disappeared from Michael's fund." "She's still trying to isolate us," Lauren observed, showing Ethan the message, "because she knows she can't handle us together." He drew her closer, ostensibly a husband's loving gesture. "Security's in position. The Thai authorities are standing by. Are you ready?" Lauren thought of Michael, safely transferred to Switzerland under heavy protection, of Henry Carter, who'd insisted on calling her daughter for the first time from his hospital bed, of the strength she'd found in finally letting someone stand beside her. "Yes," she said firmly, "let's end this." They took the elevator together, projecting calm even as Lauren's heart raced. Jessica had always excelled at psychological warfare. This confrontation would require perfect control. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse suite. Jessica stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, their mother seated tensely on a nearby couch. "I said, come alone." Jessica's voice carried familiar venom. "My husband and I don't keep secrets anymore," Lauren replied evenly, "unlike some people." Catherine Mitchell looked between her daughters, confusion evident. "Jessica said Michael's in danger, that Lauren's been stealing from his treatment fund. I don't understand." "Show her the real documents," Lauren challenged. "The ones proving Dad and Ryan siphoned money while you helped hide the transfers." "Lauren?" Their mother's voice shook. "Always the noble one," Jessica spat. "The perfect daughter. Do you know how sick I am of hearing about your sacrifices, your dedication, while I was invisible, fighting for every scrap of attention? So, you decided to destroy both our families?" Ethan's voice was dangerously soft. use my brother's bitterness, Lauren's love for Michael, your father's greed, all to tear everything down. Jessica's laugh held an edge of hysteria. They deserved it, all of them. And you, she pointed at Lauren, you'll finally know what it feels like to lose everything you protected. That's where you're wrong. Lauren took a step forward. I'm not losing anything, and neither are you. Confusion flickered across Jessica's face. What? You wanted attention? Recognition? You could have come to me. We could have fought Dad's manipulation together. Lauren's voice gentled. We still can. Don't. Jessica's composure cracked. Don't you dare act like you understand. I do understand, because while you were watching me, I was watching you, seeing how hard you worked, how smart you are, how much pain you carried. Lauren took another step. You're my sister, Jess. That hasn't changed. For a moment, something vulnerable flashed in Jessica's eyes. Then they hardened again. Pretty words. But we both know that the police are outside. Ethan cut in smoothly. That your offshore accounts are frozen. That every scrap of evidence you gathered has already been secured. Jessica's hand moved toward her purse. Lauren tensed, but Ethan was already in motion, crossing the room with fluid grace. The gun clattered to the floor as Catherine screamed. It's over, Lauren said softly. The only question is whether you face it alone or with family beside you. I'll wrap up with the final 500-word resolution section, bringing emotional closure to all storylines. 6 months later, Lauren stood in Michael's hospital room in Switzerland, watching her brother take his first steps after successful surgery. The morning sun streamed through wide windows, catching the matching rings on her and Ethan's hands, new ones they'd chosen together, replacing their original business arrangement with something real. Show off, Jessica called from the doorway, making Michael grin. Her sister's designer outfit had been replaced by simpler clothes, her community service badge still clipped to her jacket. The court-mandated therapy and reduced sentence in exchange for evidence against their father had brought out a different side of Jessica, one that reminded Lauren of the little girl who used to follow her around before competition poisoned their relationship. You're early, Lauren noted, pleasantly surprised. Figured the kid could use extra support. Jessica moved to Michael's other side, steadying him. Besides, Henry insisted on being wheeled up himself, and someone had to make sure he didn't try the stairs. As if summoned, Ethan appeared, pushing his grandfather's wheelchair. The elderly patriarch had survived the assassination attempt with renewed perspective. His previous suspicion of Lauren transformed into fierce pride. My grandchildren, Henry announced, including both Mitchell siblings in his proud gaze, putting us all to shame. The moment was interrupted by Lauren's phone buzzing. She checked it, then smiled. Ryan's program application was accepted. He starts addiction counseling next week. And Dad? Michael asked quietly. Cooperating with authorities, Ethan answered, moving to stand beside his wife. The reduced sentence helps, but more importantly, he's finally getting help. Lauren leaned into her husband's embrace, watching Jessica help Michael take another step. The family they'd rebuilt wasn't perfect. There were still tough days, hard conversations, and trust to be earned. But it was real, founded on truth instead of manipulation. Ready for the board meeting? Ethan murmured in her ear. Lauren smiled, thinking of the joint proposal she and Jessica had developed for expanding the company's medical research division. More than ready. That's my girl, Henry said warmly, though I expect you both to take proper maternity leave when that little one arrives. Lauren's hand drifted to her still flat stomach as Jessica gasped and Michael whooped with delight. The newest Carter would arrive into a family transformed by love, truth, and second chances, exactly as it should be. Together? Ethan asked quietly, covering her hand with his. Lauren looked at her family, all of them, and felt the last walls around her heart dissolve. Together,